Well, a warm welcome back, I hope, after a good lunch. And welcome then to the first session after lunch on this last day of our pre-assembly. I am Anders Wejryd, former Archbishop of Church of Sweden, and currently the so-called President for Europe within the World Council of Churches. I think that ends at the same moment when the assembly opens. So until then, I am. Our theme this afternoon is, as you have seen, churches in Europe and the global ecumenical movement: questions, challenges, priorities. And 6 panelists have been asked to give us a 3-minute input each, and then we'll see what happens after that. Unfortunately, things have happened already before. So out of the 6 panelists, we only have 4 left. Dr. Isabel Hamley, she has fallen ill. I don't think it's anything serious, but it was bad enough that she could not be with us. And Archbishop Wilma, he is taking part in a national manifestation for peace and freedom in Ukraine, which was decided upon as late as yesterday or the day before yesterday. And so I think they both have our full respect. We have to try to do without them. Maybe this also means that if someone speaks 3 minutes and 30 seconds, we can live with that, because we have a pretty generous schedule, as I can see this afternoon. Maybe before we go into what is really serious, I would like to mention and congratulate first Benjamin Simon, who had his birthday yesterday. Congratulations, Benjamin. And then Anne Heitman, who has her birthday today. So congratulations from all of you, from all of us to both of you. We have to take note of the positive and heartfelt things also in difficult times as the one we are in now. Well, churches in Europe and the global ecumenical movement: questions, challenges, priorities. This is, of course, a warm-up for us who are going to take part in the assembly this fall. What are other people thinking about this? We are probably all having our own questions and challenges, but we need to listen to others also to get a more balanced view and a wider scope. I have not asked the panelists yet about the order of appearance, so to speak, but why not follow the order on the program that we have been given? And that would lead to having Reverend Michel Charbonnier from the Waldensian Church in Italy as the first speaker. Are you with us, Michel?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. The floor is yours.
Okay. So I was not expecting such a sudden start, but I'll do my best. So thank you for inviting me to speak. Maybe I will try to start from what I have already heard and then add something more. I think we have all heard many times, not only in these 2 days, but let's say on the way to Karlsruhe, we have heard many times 2 words coming from Europe. It's secularization and reconciliation. I think it's okay. I also think it depends very much on how we talk about them. And then I will add maybe a third or 3 or 4 third and fourth word, which I did not hear enough, in my opinion. So when I say it depends on how we talk about these words, I think that entering a global setting and trying to have a discourse on these words, we always have to be careful on how we are perceived from other world perspectives. And that is the case with the WCC and the WCC Assembly. So I see the risk of, I see two risks that might lead to confirming some stereotypes about Europe. The two risks are being too much self-centered and being too much self-absolving. And this can apply to all the words I'm going to speak about. Secularization, for instance. Secularization, we talked already a lot about secularization. I really feel that if I try to look from the outside to us, European churches, then I would definitely say that we need to stop complaining too much about secularization. We need to stop whining about secularization, because from other world perspectives, there are probably many other problems we should be concerned about as churches. So secularization, we spoke yesterday, is it a enemy? Is it a partner? I would say it's a fact. It's a fact, and the decision is ours, whether we see it as a threat and we keep complaining about it and about how irrelevant churches have become, or rather we see it as a challenge and we try to do something about all the other problems that as Christians we should be compelled about, and show people that churches are still relevant because they tackle those problems instead of whining about how irrelevant they have become. So this is about secularization. Then reconciliation. Europe is a place where reconciliation happens, and we have stressed a lot that. Sometimes we also remember that Europe is a place where reconciliation is needed. And unfortunately, the events of the last days have reminded us very painfully about that. I feel that we don't remember enough and we don't say enough in a global setting that Europe is also a place where divisions and fractures have happened in the past, where divisions and fractures have been created in the past, and maybe they also have been exported to other places, to other continents. So in many places around the globe, there are divisions that are not born there, but those places have been the battlefields of divisions which were born in Europe. And I think we have to be very sensitive and to be very clear about that, about the fact that we know that, and we need to confess our sins about that. And last thing, there is a word that I don't hear enough, which is migration. Migration, because we are not, I feel we are not clear enough about many causes of migration are generated in Europe and affect the whole world. We created, as Europeans, many of the causes that lead people to flee or to leave in search of a better future. We speak a lot about migration as a problem. We don't confess enough that many causes of that are born here. And there's been not enough discourse about the fact that Europe is still a fortress. And we understand ourselves still as a fortress where some people are allowed to enter and some people are not. So to sum it up, I think the big missing word in our European discourse in a global setting is justice. Justice, meaning social justice, economical justice, ecological justice, and our responsibility on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A truthful perspective on ourselves and how much we have caused and are part of. And very often these things are so difficult to speak out about, but maybe it is more possible for the churches to do this than most anyone else, as we are really, I mean, we boast that we are an international organization, an international body. So thank you very much. I move on then to Reverend Szabina Sztojka from the Reformed Church in Hungary. Please, your input.
Thank you so much. I could only join now because of the current situation and work, but my name is Szabina Sztojka, and I'm a newly ordained minister in the Reformed Church in Hungary, currently serving at an English-speaking church in Budapest called the Scottish Mission, and I'm also the leader of the Romani ministry of our church. When I was thinking about what I can share in these 3 minutes, I was thinking about how can our church, as a Reformed Church in Hungary that goes beyond the current borders of Hungary as well, how can we contribute to the global ecumenical movements, and what are the common contexts where ecumenism can be strengthened because of the similarities of our different churches? And as the topic was reconciliation and unity, those were the main lines where I was thinking of mainly our challenges as a church. And unity, when I was thinking, I would add the word unity in diversity. How can that happen in a very traditional church here in Hungary? How can these 2 things, reconciliation and unity in diversity, can reflect in our worship and church views, theology, and ministry? As you know, the Hungarian Reformed Church has a long history. We have over 1 million people in Hungary who are part of our church, and over 1,000 congregations. And mostly these communities are concentrated on the northern eastern part of Hungary, where the Romani communities are overwhelmingly present as well. So that will be very important a bit later when I talk about our challenges in reconciliation. But as the speaker before me said as well, our main challenge is that other churches are facing too in Europe is that our traditional church structure that we have, and how the Reformed identity and how that is so deeply connected of what does it mean to be Hungarian culturally as well. And that's very understandable historically how those 2 connect. So being Reformed means that you are culturally Hungarian, and that was very important in our worship and liturgy and a lot of other things as well. But those, in many cases, these things, they prevent the church from renewal and from developing a more missional view. So being a unified church, and I understand more that in culture and how that reflects in liturgy and worship, makes it difficult for outsiders to feel at home, because anyone who didn't grow up in the Reformed Church can find it difficult to adapt the very specific church culture. And that is especially true when it comes to the Romani communities in Hungary, but anyone else. So the church insists on this because that being Reformed means Hungarian, and how those very beautiful church cultures are still important, but that in many cases they make it to ministers and to church members. They develop this fear of renewal and losing, and the fear of losing identity. But that ends up that results in excluding communities because they do not find a home in the churches. And that leads to this thing that we have these beautiful, huge churches all over Hungary. And when it comes to Sunday, only 5-6 people worship in them. And because of how they cannot sustain themselves, that means ministers will then serve 4 or 5 or even more villages on one Sunday, and they're responsible to these communities. And that results in, of course, to the ministers and how they become overwhelmed and burnt out and feeling alone. So that means these ministers, they don't have a time, or they didn't develop a missional view when it comes to church. So it ends up very hard for them to serve to those parts of their communities who didn't grow up reformed. That means also my community, which is the Romani people. And one example I witnessed that there was a minister who wanted to serve towards the Romani community, and I visited his church, and as we were talking to the elders said, this is a church that is not a place for the Roma community. And I was there, and he said he doesn't want anyone from the Roma community to enter the building. And that really shows this example, the very deep ethnic conflict that we face in these villages. And for me, as a Romani pastor, I had to raise up the issue, but well, I am here and we have a place in the Reformed Church. So how can we deal with that on a local level? So reconciliation when it comes to Hungarians and the Romani communities are very important, but that is also a big contribution that we are making right now when it comes to other ecumenical relations and different Romani groups in Hungary. And reconciliation, of course, is very well needed, because when it comes to how people still carry wounds and deep wounds from communism, it's still there. So we see a lot of levels of healing when it comes to reconciliation. And I said, unity in diversity could be the key for the church renewal. Because if these communities can be addressed, then the church could survive. But if not, then they will have to close the church buildings at different villages. So we want the Hungarian Reformed Church to recognize this need of reconciliation and unity, and how that is important in our ecumenical dialogues. So our church can survive, but not because of our importance, but because of the calling that we have to serve towards our local communities and be the light in those communities when it comes to righteousness and reconciliation. So that's what we are dealing with. Those are some of our problems that I could share in 3 minutes. And I think I spoke even longer. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ecumenical movement has, of course, always had to wrestle with this. How much culture, how much faith, how general, how specific. This is really a challenge now that goes from the ecumenical movement to our churches. It goes both ways. Yes, thank you very much. I should remind you that the chat function is, of course, working. So I see there has been some comment already. And Katarina Pegrino will keep track of that and feed it to me so I don't miss out. Thank you very much, Szabina. Now we go to His Grace Bishop Hovakim Manukyan from the Armenian Apostolic Church. Please.
Thank you very much. And if this meeting happened a month ago, maybe I would choose some other items to speak about, because the churches in Europe have a lot of priorities, but the war in Ukraine that broke out recently and the war that happened in Armenia, Karabakh 2 years ago, just urged me to present this topic from different perspective. First of all, it's a pleasure to take part in this virtual meeting and to share with you my thoughts on questions, challenges, priorities for the churches in the region. This subject is increasingly critical in recent years, and it requires extensive study. But for brevity of time, allow me to share just a few points. First of all, we are having this meeting in the midst of a crisis and a war in and around Ukraine. At the time when Europe and the whole world is concerned about uncertainties ahead. This war is not only a military challenge, but the crisis also presents us moral, theological, and sociological challenge. Even as we are coming out of the global pandemic, this conflict is a tragedy on so many levels. When a war breaks out, it implies that we all have failed as churches, countries, communities, societies. We have failed, especially now, as brothers are destroying each other, Christians who share the same faith, culture, language, and history are fighting against each other. 2 years ago, Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh were attacked too. As you know, historically, Karabakh was part of Armenia, but it was incorporated into Soviet Azerbaijan by Stalin in the early 1920s. The war in Karabakh, launched by Azerbaijan in 2020, was an uneven war. Azerbaijani armed forces, supported by the Turkish military and with the use of mercenaries from Syria, launched a large-scale devastating war that lasted for 44 days, crushing a small nation that was in no way a match to Azerbaijani military power. The Armenians are still dealing with consequences of the war. There are dozens and dozens of POWs held in Baku and continue encroachment by Azerbaijan into Armenian sovereign territory. In the meantime, Azerbaijan continues to carry out a massive information war as part of its decades-long Armenophobic campaign. Most concerning is Azerbaijan's historical revisionism, which appropriates Armenian religious and cultural heritage and presents it as Azerbaijani or Albanian Christian. What we need to take note of is the fact that democracies and democratic societies are not tolerated in this region. Instead, authoritarian regimes like Azerbaijan are intent to obliterate such open societies which desire to live in freedom and peace. Yesterday, it was Karabakh, today is Ukraine, and tomorrow there might be many other societies who would be victimized. Church leaders and communities in the region have the greatest challenge to raise the prophetic voice of the church at the time of such human-made calamities. Advocating and working towards peace is and must be our priority. However, we cannot build peace with double standards and both-side approach. We must call things what they are, remaining true to our faith and faithful to the truth. I pray for peace, and I believe that for our churches, there is a long way ahead to work for peace and reconciliation in the region. This must be the priority for the ecumenical movement in Europe. Thank you.
I'm still muted. Thank you very much, Bishop. Thank you. Yes. I mean, so often when things move on as they usually do, we don't see how many tensions and divisions that actually are there, and how important it is for the church to both have respect for what's going on and a clear line of love. Thank you very much. The last speaker then will be Miss Vilma Saarinen from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Finland.
Hello and greetings from Western Finland.
Oh, then I should say Reverend or...
Yes.
Yes.
Nowadays, yes.
Nowadays, yes, obviously.
I'm 28 years old, youth pastor in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland. And I'm also done a lot of voluntary work for youth participation. So I'll share my thoughts, especially from that point of view. In Finland, my church is a national church, and older generations, they give to Lutheran Church a cultural role, but younger generations, they see us more as faceless institution. And I think this is first challenge we should face. So I ask how to be Christians and communities in a public space, for example, in social media, with our faces. Second point, showing faces is not easy because of disagreements deepen around the world. And now I'm not speaking only shocking crisis in Ukraine. I'm not comparing these together, but in Finland and also in my church, there is much hate speech between so-called liberals and conservatives, which are very problematic but widely used terms. In surveys, youth say that they don't want to express their opinions because they are afraid of feedback. If this continues, we will face more crises of democracy. So I too ask, maybe one of our priorities should again be work for peace. My third point is that our youth is suffering because of climate change, pandemic, and now also violence they see in social media. A number of those who contact Finland's main helping chat for youth has doubled on Thursday. They suffer most of all lack of hope, I think so. So we have to help them to see meaning of life and to build future. But at the same time, I'm worried because of the hard times we are living through. We have turned inwards and focused only our own concerns. For example, we have less volunteers in my parish than we used to have. And they say that they have already too much to do just to survive. I think churches must be the voice of hope in this world. And we must remember that youth give more value to symbolic action than speech. My fourth point is that it is important to get the younger generation involved in the ecumenical movement. When it began, there were lots of young adults interested in ecumenism. They traveled and spent time together and gained experience. Later, they became, for example, bishops. Nowadays, it is very difficult to get that experience without having already high titles. So I ask, how do we educate the next generation to take responsibility? And because everyone can't participate gatherings like this assembly, one of our priorities should be also to support ecumenism in the grassroots level, so there could be more meaningful roles to be part of our movement. And then my last point, because everything I've said we should be interested in needs resources. The last challenge is weakening of financial support of ecumenism, which means we have to prioritize more strictly. During the last years, we have learned to use more technology to communicate, and that helps a lot, but it doesn't fully replace meeting face to face. Could youth innovate new ways to live together? Anyway, if ecumenism is understood as something extra, it is on the list what we can cut off to save resources. As churches, we have to remind that living together is our identity, not something extra. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these challenges that go mainly to our churches and how they and we are to take up the responsibilities of our time and of tomorrow, but also challenges that go to the ecumenical movement. How can the ecumenical movement pick this up in order to be to help the churches and help us to respond? Thank you very much. Well, the idea was that we should get inputs from different perspectives, and I think we have, and different realities. Both more pressing and more, so to speak, normal realities.